We'll start our top 10 with the smallest plane in the world, the Star Bumblebee. It was built specifically to set a world record and get this title. Its wingspan is smaller than the average person's height, and the length of the plane is the same as a regular sedan. But this baby can surprise you. Its maximum speed is similar to a supercar, 190 miles per hour. Still, it has only risen in the air a few times, and it even had to make an emergency landing. But no one was injured, and the restored plane was given to a private collection. By the way, the cost of building one Star Bumblebee was about $10,000, so it was really a regular sedan among the planes, one that could only carry one person. Next on the list is a Cessna 172. This airplane is also a record breaker, not for its size this time, but for the number of built units. To date, more than 45,000 aircraft have been built, and it remains in production since 1956. As for its size, its length can be compared with the length of a limousine, and the wingspan is a little less than a school bus. Far fewer people can board it though, only the pilot plus 3 passengers. In 1959, this aircraft set a world record for the duration of a refueling flight. 2 pilots took off at a Las Vegas airport and landed there in 64 days, 22 hours, and 19 minutes. Without refueling, the latest Cessna model can fly 800 miles. It's like the distance from San Francisco to Las Vegas and back. We move on to larger and more powerful aircraft. Embraer Legacy 600. It's slightly longer than a subway car, but much more comfortable. Figures. After all, it's a private aircraft worth $25 million. But if you want one, then be prepared to pay an additional $500,000 to $1 million a year just for plane maintenance. Now this plane is similar to a beluga whale in its shape. Actually, that's what it's called. Airbus A300-600 ST Beluga. It's designed to carry aircraft parts and external cargo. It's also transported space shuttles. It looks like a mother airplane carrying her baby. Beluga was the one who transported the Columbus module for the ISS. Its length is like 2 baseball fields and almost the same wingspan. Its cargo bay is so big that it can easily accommodate the fuselage of another plane. Amazingly, it only takes 2 people to fly such a huge machine. But despite the size of its cargo compartment, Beluga can lift no more than 47 tons, or 30 hippos, whatever they prefer on board. Its cost is about 180 million euros. It's almost like a fleet of 600 Cessnas. Boeing 787 Dreamliner. It's one of the most efficient aircraft in the world. This airplane holds the record for the longest flight without refueling. In March 2020, it flew from Papeete to Paris. The plane flew without landing for almost 16 hours and covered a distance of over 9,700 miles. This is like the distance from New York to Los Angeles 4 times. The cost of this big guy is estimated at $300 million. This is like 30 of the most expensive Rolls-Royces, or 30 million cinema tickets. Hughes H-4 Hercules. This is actually a flying boat, and it was made of wood. It's the biggest flying boat ever built, and it had an enormous wingspan, 321 feet. To get this thing in the air, 8 propeller engines were used, each with 3,000 horsepower. And even though this water monster was built in 1947, it could lift more cargo than the modern Airbus Beluga. Hercules could lift a weight of 59 tons. That's like a modern tank, or about 30 SUVs. But originally, it was built to transport about 750 people at a time. Still, the payload and maximum speed of this aircraft remain an issue. This wooden guy has only made 1 flight in its life. It climbed to a height of about 65 feet and flew 1.2 miles above Los Angeles Harbor. Despite this, engineer Howard Hughes kept this monster in working condition for almost 30 years, spending about $1 million per year. Airbus A380. This is the largest passenger plane in the world. It has 2 decks and can accommodate about 850 passengers. It's like a population of a small village, all on board one airplane. To accommodate this many passengers, it has an impressive size. Its length is almost as much as a soccer field, as is its wingspan, and its height is more than a 7-story building. On top of all this, the Airbus can travel incredible distances without refueling. It can take off in Iceland and land on the tip of South America. The only disadvantage of A380 is its price, $445 million. With this money, you can buy 4 private islands in the British Virgin Islands. A Saudi prince once bought one of these and modified it into a private aircraft. Now, it looks like an expensive mansion or hotel inside. It has become the largest and most expensive private jet. It's estimated to cost about $500 million. Oh, and by the way, just to take off, this giant needs a runway of almost 10,000 feet. So not all airports in the world can take an Airbus A380. Scaled Composites Model 351 Stratolaunch. An unusual name for an aircraft, but its appearance is even more bizarre. This aircraft bears the title of the longest wingspan in aviation history of all time, 385 feet. This is more than the length of a soccer field, plus a limousine. The pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer are in the right fuselage cockpit. The cockpit of the left fuselage is used as a storage unit. 6 powerful engines help this giant take off, and 8 racks with a total number of 28 wheels help the big guy to land. Stratolaunch was designed to launch Pegasus rockets from it, but now it's going to be used to launch hypersonic flights. Well, whatever its purpose, pilots will have to be careful because so far there's only one Stratolaunch Model 351 in the world. Jumbo Jet, or Boeing 747. This is the world's first long-haul double-deck aircraft. This baby held the title of the heaviest and most capacious aircraft for 36 years until Airbus A380 appeared. Its wingspan is more than the length of a hockey field, and its length is 250 feet, which is equal to the height of 15 giraffes. This aircraft set a record for the number of passengers on one flight. During a rescue operation in Ethiopia, there were 1,086 people on board the 747. This plane was also used to transport the President of the United States, or his First Lady. In this case, the aircraft was assigned a call sign, Air Force One, or Air Force One Foxtrot. And the cargo version of this plane was used for transportation of the space shuttle from reserve airfields to the place of its launch at Cape Canaveral. Antonov AN-225 Maria is the heaviest aircraft ever built. It also has the largest wingspan of any aircraft in operational service. The distance between the tips of its wings is almost like the length of a soccer field, and its body length is 275 feet. This is like 6 school buses in a row. Naturally, it's a power lifter among planes. In 2009, Antonov was listed in the Guinness Book of Records for lifting the heaviest monocargo in aviation history, 187 tons. That's like 1,000 of the smallest aircraft in the world, the Star Bumblebee, or 4 Boeing 737s. But the absolute record for Antonov's lifting capacity is 253 tons. This is like half the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. Well, the records of this aircraft are quite long. Since its first flight, the AN-225 has set 240 world records. This is a unique case in aviation, and is in fact a record itself. This thing is not exactly an airplane, but it deserves a place on our list. The Caspian Sea Monster. It was an experimental wing ship. That means it used air force reflected from the surface of the earth or water to stay in the air. Formally, it was a ship, as it could fly at an altitude of only a few meters. But it looked more like an amphibian, and only pilots could fly it. A pretty complicated system, right? For a long time, it was the heaviest plane in the world. When it was empty, it weighed 240 tons. That's like 60 elephants. And it took 10 engines to get this thing in the air, 5 on each side. But it still had enough speed to get from New York to Washington in half an hour.
Piano parlor at 35,000 feet. You won't believe you're on an airplane. That could have been the slogan of American Airlines. They pulled 50 seats out of each Boeing 747 and used the space to create a passenger lounge with armchairs, cocktail tables, and even a Wurlitzer electric piano. Their passengers could sing their favorite songs to the tickled ivories during long flights across the country. Luxury in economy. In the early 1980s, Continental Airlines installed so-called Polynesian pubs in some of its DC-10 jets. It was a small bar with snacks and drinks, round tables, and swivel chairs. There was also a video pong console. Continental took an approach worth appreciating. This kind of luxury was for economy-class passengers. Now imagine what first class was getting. Fine dining and flying. Australia's largest airline, Qantas, boasted a luxurious Captain Cook first-class lounge. The company turned the 747's upper deck into a full-on restaurant. It had it all: good food, good drinks, and good company. Flowers to prove a point. Pan American World Airways advertised the 707 Clipper as a machine without vibration. They put fresh flowers in a vase on each table to show passengers that the water wouldn't spill right on their laps during the flight. Pan Am featured freshly cut flowers until the late 1970s. Slightly questionable if turbulence struck, but still romantic. Full-size beds. During the 1940s, everyone enjoyed the privilege of sleeping comfortably during a flight. On the Boeing Stratocruiser, seats were roomy and could be turned into a full-on bed. The aircraft even had spacious locker rooms where passengers could change into their PJs or into a different outfit. Ooh, how the times have changed. Wacky colors. Until the mid-60s, airplanes were painted in light colors, or not at all. The only bright spot was usually a colored strip along the fuselage. But not American airline Braniff International. They hired a famous architect and interior designer, Alexander Gerard, to make their planes brighter. He used a vibrant palette that includes such shades as purple metallic and lemon yellow. But why dabble in bizarre paint jobs when you can make wacky planes, like the Flying Barrel? Officially called the Stipa Caproni, it was one of the funniest planes in aviation history. Italian engineer Luigi Stipa designed the thing to have its propeller inside the bulky barrel-like fuselage. The bizarre-looking plane actually proved to be quiet and stable in flight. The only drawback was the speed. It couldn't go much faster than 80 miles per hour because of drag. That wasn't much, even for the 30s. 9-winged super boat plane. Well, what else can you call it? Officially, it was the Caproni CA-60. Yep, the same aircraft manufacturer that built Luigi Stipa's weird barrel design. If you're wondering whether this thing could really fly, the answer is not really. It had a brief maiden flight, but wasn't successful on its second attempt. Its dreams of soaring across the Atlantic went down with it. A wingless plane. Famous aeronautical engineer Alexander Lippisch contributed a lot to the study of aerodynamics, but man, did he make some weird aircraft. His Dornier Aerodyne was basically another flying barrel, only this one didn't have wings at all. It's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that, unfortunately, lost the popularity contest to helicopters. The Spruce Goose. Meet the largest flying boat ever built. Officially called the Hughes H-4 Hercules, the aircraft was nicknamed the Spruce Goose because of its birch frame. The plane was made from wood because of an aluminum shortage at the time. Its first flight was also its last. The wooden giant managed an altitude of 70 feet over the water, but landed after going a mere mile. The Flying Umbrella. In search of better performance and reliability, aeronautical engineer Paul Nemeth developed a round-wing plane. People who saw his Nemeth parasol aptly dubbed it the flying umbrella. Its strangely circular wing was set 16 feet wide, enough to set a Volkswagen Beetle on top. Though only one prototype of the Nemeth parasol was ever built, this plane entered the list of the weirdest aircraft design. The Flying Pancake. This delicious-sounding breakfast-inspired nickname belongs to the Vought V-173. It was an experimental vertical takeoff and landing plane. It was called a pancake because of its yellow disc-shaped body. This thing was pretty much wingless. Any lift generated was all thanks to that flat fuselage. An inflatable plane. In the 1950s, Goodyear created the inflatoplane. The idea was to use it as a rescue aircraft that could be rolled up and packed into a small container. I'm talking smaller than your average bed. It was made of fabric to make that possible and could be blown up to full size, all 20 feet of it, in only 5 minutes. But in 1972, the project was shut down because of its main drawback. The plane could be popped with a single pinprick. The Super Guppy. Try not to stare at his forehead. Go ahead. Nah, you can't not look at it. That's okay. The Aerospace Line Super Guppy is the only airplane that could fit an entire spaceship. And that's what mostly these models were made for, to transport NASA's rockets and their parts. So how did they load that massive cargo space? The plane's huge nose lifts up. NASA still uses one of these aircraft today. The Antonov AN-225. This monster of an airplane is quite the record holder. It can hold the most cargo with a maximum capacity of over 500,000 pounds, meaning this plane could transport your house somewhere if you're looking to relocate. It also has the longest wingspan, almost 300 feet. The Statue of Liberty could lie across it. Miniature aircraft. This plane is the exact opposite of the previous two. The McDonnell XF-85 Goblin was supposed to fit inside another plane. This aircraft made history as one of the smallest planes ever built. Because of its unusual shaped fuselage, the Goblin was nicknamed the Flying Egg. Unfortunately, it never made it past the prototype stage. The thing was too hard to control. Backward wings. When watching it in action, you'd think this plane was flying backwards. That's because the wings on the Grumman X-29 were angled in reverse. Strange as the design was, this plane had extraordinary maneuverability and a light structure. But of course, there was one major drawback. It was the most aerodynamically unstable aircraft ever built. The computerized flight control system had to make 40 corrections per second to provide some stability. Oops. The Chopper Cycle. The De Laughlin HZ-1 Aerocycle was an American single-pilot flying vehicle developed back in the 1950s. To turn left or right, they had to tilt the entire chopper in that direction, sort of like maneuvering a motorcycle. The Aerocycle could reach speeds of over 60 miles per hour, and apparently pilots only needed 20 minutes of instruction to learn how to fly it. The Boomerang Plane. At first glance, the Rutan Model 202 Boomerang looks like two planes holding hands in the air. But it's actually just one fuselage. It houses one propeller, and the other is on a separate engine nearby. Thanks to its strange but efficient design, the plane could fly nearly straight at all speeds even if one of its engines failed. Its designer, engineer Bert Rutan, used his own brainchild for personal transportation. Invisible aircraft. The Northrop Tacit Blue, nicknamed the Whale, looked like anything but a plane. But sometimes stealth outweighs aerodynamic concerns. The goal of this experimental plane was to show that an aircraft can be virtually invisible to radars. Thanks to its strange shape, the Whale could operate very close to the front line without being detected. Combo Craft Airship. Although it looks like a typical airship, the technology in the Lockheed Martin P-791 is much more sophisticated. It was built to combine the high speed of a jet with the buoyancy of a Zeppelin. This is a very fuel-effective solution. Hybrid airships burn less than 1/10 the fuel of a helicopter per ton.
At the beginning of the 20th century, somewhere off the coast of West Africa, a German steamship was leaving the port. Suddenly, the weather got worse, and the vessel entered a thick fog. The sailors ran aground on a sandbank close to the shore. Luckily, no one was hurt, and they were even able to save their precious cargo. But the ship was stuck in the sand for good. And it was not alone there. Nearly the entire length of the western coast of Namibia is called Skeleton Coast. If the name sounds scary, that's because it is. This 976-mile-long beach line is among the most dangerous places on Earth. The local Bushman tribes believe that their supreme deity made this land when it was angry. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to set foot in Namibia in the 15th century. And yep, they didn't like Skeleton Coast either. Portuguese explorers thought this land presented the gates to the underworld. This is the place where the Namib Desert meets the Atlantic Ocean. It might be dangerous, but it's actually beautiful. Plus, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. If Skeleton Coast had a PR manager, they would quit on the first day on the job. The area is not exactly tourist-friendly because of its geography and history. Beneath the sand and the waves, there is a secret ocean currently lurking for unsuspecting sailors. It's called Benguela Current. It flows towards the north along the coast of southern Africa. This part of the Atlantic is rich in marine life, but the current's land neighbor isn't that happy with the deal. This arid climate created the Namib Desert, one of the driest regions on Earth. And that marine life I just mentioned? It's sharks. 11 species of them to be exact. And yes, the great white decides to pop by once in a while. So far, we've got a desert landscape, strong currents, and sharks. Not a place for a beachside resort, definitely. But if someone ends up on Skeleton Coast, will they know they're in danger? Don't worry, they will. The beach is littered with wrecks of all sizes and shapes. If you remember that German ship I mentioned in the very beginning, its massive and rusted stern is now sticking out from the desert sand. There are some 500 wrecks in total scattered along the coast, and it's a mixed crowd, from Portuguese galleons centuries old to ships that ran ashore here in the 21st century. A modern fishing ship called Zela India managed to slip from its tow rope in 2008 and ended up on Skeleton Coast. Okay, it didn't escape on its own, it had some help from the elements. But it's better to be a tourist attraction on a beach than to be broken up for scrap. That's where the trawler was originally going, poor thing. Skeleton Coast's most famous inhabitant, to call it such a place, is the wreck of the Dunedin Star. The British cargo liner ran aground here in 1942. The massive rescue operation that followed reveals why it's so dangerous for sailors to end up here. The rescuers managed to save all of the crew and passengers, but at a heavy price. An aircraft and a tugboat were lost in the process. It took the last of the rescuers a full 2 months to return home to Cape Town. Why, you might wonder? One look at the map of the region reveals the reason. It's an endless sea of yellow, which is the sand. There are so few roads here, so Skeleton Coast is hard to reach by land. There are also legal obstacles. You need a special permit to drive into the area. But the skeletons in the name of the area don't only refer to ships, they also stand for animal bones. Most of these belong to whales and seals. Many animals have adapted to the area, so lions and hyenas roam the coastline in search of a meal. Yeah, now there are hungry lions as well, as if those sharks weren't enough. Other animals with a temporary residence on Skeleton Coast include elephants, cheetahs, leopards, and giraffes. In 1971, the Namibian authorities established a national park here, but except for surfers, after an adrenaline rush, they don't get many visitors. You can understand why. The Namib Desert is the oldest desert in the world, and it's not very tourist-friendly either. Those who travel to the region should pack sunscreen and a warm winter jacket. A weird combo, right? Well, not so much when you think that during the day, temperatures soar over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, the air temperature drops below freezing. What a climate roller coaster! And that's not the final danger. Yep, there's more. Remember how that German ship got lost in thick fog? Yeah, it wasn't a one-off event. Because of the region's climate, fog shows up frequently. Sailors should cover their ears now, but this fog is actually good for wildlife. This is their only source of water in the Namib Desert. Reptiles and mammals have adapted to the harsh climate. They use as little water as possible. Shifting sands, thick fog, strong currents, lions, and sharks. Not the stuff you would put in a tourist booklet, but Skeleton Coast isn't the only beach on Earth you wouldn't want to spend your vacation on. I will take you to Cape Tribulation in Australia. The area covers some 48 square miles in the northwestern part of the continent. And no, the area is not as dry as Skeleton Coast. It's part of the Daintree rainforest. You could say that here, it is the rainforest, not the desert that meets the ocean. The beach at Cape Tribulation is straight from a postcard. But looks can be deceiving. Australia? Probably sharks. No, crocodiles are out here to get you if you decide to go for a dip in the sea. There are saltwater crocodiles that the locals call salties. Well, that's a cute nickname for such a dangerous reptile. And it's not just that. The wildlife seems to have a beef with visitors. From October to June, the waters around Cape Tribulation are full of box jellyfish. Their venom affects the human cardiovascular system. When touched by a jellyfish out at sea, swimmers won't have enough time to reach land for help. Vinegar helps neutralize the sting, so you might want to keep a spare bottle in your luggage. Crocodiles and jellyfish sound dangerous, but there's one more animal you should look after. It's the wild boar. It might sound funny, but you won't laugh when you're being chased by one of these across the beach. 21 million wild boars live in Australia. They're mostly active at night, making it even more dangerous if they charge at you. The best defense is running in circles. Wild boars can't cut corners well. That's probably why we don't see many of them taking up careers as race drivers. Cape Tribulation has one last danger installed for you, and it's not an animal. Out here, even the trees are plotting against visitors. The stinging tree got its name for a reason. If you try to pick one of its beautiful red berries, it'll fight back. Its prickles are like tiny glass shards. The less than pleasant effect on your skin will last for a month. Then there is this wait a while bush. Who keeps naming them like this? This long vine has spikes that grab hold and just don't let go. They are so strong they can pull a human off a horse. You'll have to wait for someone to come by and save you from this thorny grabber. If you are about to cross this Australian beach from the vacation list, hold on for a second. Tourism is booming here. The local authorities have restricted access to all of the danger zones. Visitors go swimming in dreamy water holes that are surrounded by lush vegetation. There are even ropes to swing from. Now, that's a beach you can finally relax on.
They said it was the most technologically advanced ship. They said it was unsinkable. And when it sank, they made a movie about it. These were the main reasons why the Titanic disaster became world famous. But unfortunately, this is not the only large-scale shipwreck. And sadly, there have been cases much worse than the tragedy of the Titanic. One of them occurred on April 27, 1865. The Sultana steamboat carried passengers and cargo daily between St. Louis and New Orleans. It was a pretty large wooden boat with 3 decks and was 260 feet long and 70 feet wide, almost twice the size of a basketball court. The ship could carry about 350 passengers, but on that unfortunate day, more than 2,000 people were on it. On April 23rd, she was making a routine voyage from New Orleans when it broke down. Something was wrong with the boiler, so the vessel docked in Vicksburg for repairs. At the port, the ship's captain, James Cass Mason, found out about an excellent opportunity to earn a lot of money. All he needed to do was to transfer a large group of former prisoners to the north. The captain agreed to do it, but the problem was that the boiler required a lot of time to repair. Mason was afraid that his competitors would take the job, so he decided to sail despite the malfunction the ship had. He patched up the holes in the boiler instead of a big repair and invited all the ex-prisoners on board. So, There was a broken boiler, an excess number of passengers, a lack of lifeboats, and not the best river conditions. Also, the captain refused to send the ex-prisoners to the hold, so they were all with ordinary passengers. There were strong chances for a shipwreck, but the greedy desire to earn more money was stronger. The Sultana went on a voyage and sailed up the river for 2 days. At this time, one of the biggest Mississippi floods in history began. The river overflowed its shores because of the flood, with the water level rising several feet. All the trees on the shore disappeared, and only the tops were sticking out of the water. The ship sailed opposite this powerful current, making the boiler work too hard. On the evening of April 26th, the Sultana arrived in Memphis, Tennessee, and they loaded even more, 120 tons of sugar and 200 passengers. She got incredibly heavy. Around midnight, the ship continued its dangerous journey. The captain sailed to barges to load a shipment of coal. At 1 a.m., the vessel left the barge. At 2 a.m., the broken boiler, unable to withstand the load, suddenly exploded. The Sultana was just 7 miles north of Memphis. Few people survived that day. The problem was that passengers trying to escape from the fire jumped into a cold river with a strong current. The Sultana disaster is considered the most tragic shipwreck in the history of the United States. The exact number of those who didn't survive is still unknown. According to various sources, this number was from 961 to 1,800 people. Don't be surprised that almost no one knows this story. There were many more survivors in the Titanic tragedy, and everybody heard about it. But the Sultana sank during one high-profile event. 12 days before the shipwreck, the country lost Abraham Lincoln. People hadn't yet recovered from this news, so no one paid much attention to the tragedy of the Sultana. Many catastrophes happened quite recently by historical standards. One of them occurred in 2002. The ferry Lajula was a Senegalese vessel. The ferry sailed twice a week, mainly along the coast of Dakar, carrying passengers who traded mango and palm oil. It made daily voyages and never faced severe problems thanks to modern rescue equipment and good repair service. But one day, the ship's crew discovered a malfunction and sent the boat to port. For almost a year, Lajula was in a non-working condition, awaiting repairs. But it didn't get high-quality service. After poor maintenance, the ferry set off on its last voyage. On September 26, 2002, Lajula sailed between southern Senegal and Dakar, and at 11 p.m. headed toward Gambia, where a strong storm began. The wind raised high waves, but this wasn't critical for the large passenger ship unless the number of people on board didn't exceed the established norm. Lajula was supposed to carry about 500 passengers, but had many more people that day. Too many passengers, poor repairs, and a strong storm caused severe problems for the ship. But the main factor in the shipwreck was that Lajula was only built for sailing in coastal waters, but that day, it sailed far from the shore. Big waves started rocking the boat, and at some point, it just turned upside down. The ship's deck went underwater, and its lower part stuck above the surface like an iceberg. All the passengers sitting in cabins fell on the ceiling and lost their orientation in space. There were no holes or damage in the ship's hull, and water flooded the lower decks for a long time. The vessel stood in a twisted position for several hours. Then, the boat began to sink when the water seeped through the deck and hold. The ocean was warm, but no one came to save the passengers. People had to wait almost 4 days to be rescued. Unfortunately, only a few managed to survive. The Philippines is a very dangerous area for ships. This place consists of several thousand islands and a vast area with shallow water. Ships can run aground and damage the hull with reefs and pitfalls. On September 20th, 1987, one of the most terrible disasters in navigation history occurred there. A Philippine passenger ferry called Dona Paz left one of the islands and sailed toward Manila. The sun was shining, the ocean was calm, and the visibility was good. But for some reason, the crew members didn't notice how the tanker Vector was approaching them. The two ships collided at low speed. The collision wasn't strong, but the problem was that the Vector had tons of oil on board, and the Dona Paz crashed into the cargo hold where that oil was stored. So it spilled all over the ocean, and then a spark slipped through. Not only did the two ships catch fire, but also filled with water. Both ships sank in a matter of seconds. Only a few dozen people survived that disaster. On September 27, 1854, the passenger ship Arctic sailed from Liverpool to New York. The fog came rolling down, and visibility got really bad. Another boat appeared out of the thick white haze, the French steamer Vesta. The ships were close enough to each other that a collision was inevitable. The French vessel was smaller, so it seemed to the Arctic's captain that Vesta had received a lot of damage. And while he was staring at the other ship, his boat got quickly filled with water. The captain gave the order to sail to the shore as fast as possible, but the ship's engines stopped working because of the flood. Then the ship's crew started to lower lifeboats with women and kids. Still, when rescuers found lifeboats with people, it turned out that only 87 out of 400 people survived, 65 crew members and 22 passengers. Surprisingly, there were only grown men among them. The ship's captain survived by clinging to the wreckage. All newspapers wrote about this story as one of the most terrible and shameful tragedies in navigation history. The survivors were criticized because they didn't save women and kids, and the crew members were accused of violating the law, since the safety of passengers should be higher than the safety of sailors. But despite this, none of them were brought to responsibility. Unfortunately, shipwrecks still occur to this day, but fortunately, there are fewer of them than before, thanks to modern navigation systems and radar. But no technology can guarantee there won't be a super strong storm or any other emergency that no one can foresee.
They say nothing is ever lost, and it's true. Let's discover ships frozen in time. The first one is truly fascinating. Here, the Antikythera shipwreck. It's a Greek trading ship from the 1st century BCE. It's located on the east side of the Greek island of Antikythera and at the merging point of the Aegean and Mediterranean seas. Around 2,000 years later, in 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers discovered the wreck. They were going to Tunisia, yet they were forced to find shelter from a storm on a nearby island. Since they couldn't go anywhere due to the storm, they decided to look for sponges until the weather got calmer. One of the divers discovered the shipwreck at depths of around 130 feet. Imagine someone going for a sponge hunt, but getting out to the surface with archaeological treasures. The captain of the sponge boat talked to the Greek officials about what they had found. The officials sent 2 ships to the wreckage. The salvage operation was successful, and discoveries are now in Greece's National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The findings included 3 life-sized marble horses, jewelry, coins, and hundreds of works of art, including a 7-foot-tall Colossus statue of Hercules. Among these treasures, Antikythera Ephebe, a bronze statue of a young man, caught more attention. Because the ephebe doesn't comply with any familiar iconographic model, and there are no known copies of his type, he held a spherical object in his hand. Scholars have different theories of who that person could be, but they are not in a consensus yet. More than 70 years later, Jacques-Yves Cousteau and his team went to the area and recovered hundreds more artifacts and the remains of 4 people. Interestingly, they discovered a complex set of interlocking gears, capable of predicting the movement of the sun, moon, and several planets. The mechanism can also show the times of solar and lunar eclipses years into the future. Think of this Antikythera mechanism as an early computer calendar, to plan significant events like agricultural activities, religious rituals, and Olympic Games. These artifacts found in the Antikythera wreckage are some of the most important findings in modern archaeology. Just the Antikythera mechanism itself has changed our perception of the limits of ancient technology. The mechanism has a sophisticated design and was made over 1,000 years ago. After all these amazing discoveries, experts believe that the wreckage site has remained largely unexplored and is mostly because of its location and the landscape of the seafloor on which the ship rests. The wreck is too deep for scuba divers but too shallow to use something like a submersible. A survey made on the seafloor in 2012 showed evidence of a second wreck about 800 feet to the south. It's clear that this area has a lot to offer humanity. What would happen if those sponge hunters didn't go to the area? Scientists found a shipwreck in Antarctica at the bottom of the Weddell Sea 107 years after it sank. The name of the ship was Endurance, and it was the lost vessel of Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. Scientists who laid eyes on it decades later say it is among the greatest undiscovered shipwrecks ever. That is why they filmed the whole discovery. The video shows the remains of the Endurance and proves it is still in remarkable condition. It has been sitting in 10,000 feet of water for over a century, yet it looks like it sank very recently. So the story goes like this. The ship was crushed by ice and sank in 1915. Shackleton and his crewmates had to escape by themselves in small lifeboats. From then on, it was all about survival. Shackleton imagined to get his crew to safety. Then, the ship sank. Yes, this is a pretty impressive story. But why did scientists prize this ship? Firstly, Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition sailed to make the first land crossing of Antarctica. Yes, the crew was trapped in ice, but the intention was important. Secondly, it's about the challenge itself of finding the shipwreck. The Weddell Sea is almost always covered in thick sea ice. You know, the same ice that made the Endurance sink. Getting near the presumed sinking location is super hard, let alone being able to conduct research. Experts of the modern expedition team foresaw the time when the lowest extent of Antarctic sea ice would come using satellite images. They realized that the weather was in their favor to start an expedition. Dr. John Shears said that they have successfully completed the world's most difficult shipwreck search, fighting against constantly shifting sea ice, blizzards, and temperatures decreasing to -0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeesh, I can't imagine the worst conditions in Antarctica if these conditions are in their favor. Lastly, look at this. It's timbers. They're very much intact. Plus, you can read the ship's name. It's still visible. Marine archaeologist Menson Bound says that this is the finest wooden shipwreck he has ever discovered. He has 50 years of career experience, so I believe the guy. So how come the wood is not rotten? Dr. Michelle Taylor, a deep-sea polar biologist, said that there has been little wood deterioration because the wood-munching animals are not in this forest-free region of Antarctica. Workers of a coal mine in East Serbia discovered 3 shipwrecks that had been there for at least 1,300 years. The largest shipwreck is an ancient Roman fleet. It's around 50 feet long with a flat bottom. It's estimated that the ship could carry a crew of 30 to 35 people. Looking at its hull, you can see the marks of repairs. Wow, this one had a lengthy career. You know, it gives us insight into more than 1,000 years ago. The 2 smaller vessels, on the other hand, match descriptions of boats used by Slavic groups to attack the Roman frontier. These 2 have been discovered under mud and clay in an ancient riverbed. Apparently, in those times, there was a Roman base in a place called Viminacium City. Interestingly, Viminacium was a provincial capital with an estimated 40,000 inhabitants in the 4th century CE. For comparison, it was even larger than Pompeii. The Kostelach coal mine is a center of hidden gems. Archaeologists had found evidence of ancient human and animal activity here before. For instance, in 2012, experts found bones of at least 5 woolly mammoths, which went extinct about 10,000 years ago. Canadian archaeologists found a ship 150 years after it went missing in the Canadian Arctic waters. This merchant ship is called HMS Investigator. It was purchased in 1848 to search for the explorer Sir John Franklin's ship that got lost in the Northwest Passage expedition. So, HMS Investigator left Britain in 1850 for this rescue operation. The expedition crew, captained by Robert McClure, sailed the Investigator into the water. He realized that he was in the final leg of the Northwest Passage, the sea route across North America. But before he could sail into the Beaufort Sea, the 122-ton ship itself got stuck in the thick ice. The crew spent the winter over the Prince of Wales Strait. The following summer, McClure tried again to sail to the end of the passage, but the ice blocked his way once more. Here, too, the crew was forced to leave the ship. He steered the crew into the Bay of Mercy. There, they were to remain until 1853, when the crew of the HMS Resolute rescued them. Imagine a crew of 60 people who had to spend 3 winters in the Arctic without even knowing if they would survive. Later on, the ship was found sitting upright in about 36 feet of water. It was in very good condition. Arctic water has prevented the outer deck of the vessel from deteriorating quickly. The outline of the ship and its timber can be clearly seen. Plus, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts on land left by the sailors. They had unloaded everything before abandoning the Investigator. 3 sailor graves and 1 British naval shipwreck had also been discovered in the area. I wonder what else they could find there.
Wow, it's the only place where 1 minute you're learning 17 natural ways how to get rid of houseflies, and the next, you're taking an epic journey straight into a black hole. More than 10 billion, with a B, views in total. That's 47 billion minutes watched, or more than 70,000 years. That's all the way back to the Ice Age. No, I wasn't around then. 40,000 videos, hundreds of topics, and most importantly you, a whole 44 million of you. Our viewers. We could populate an entire country if we wanted to. We'd like to continue helping you learn and giving you useful skill improvement tips. Got a thirst for knowledge? We've prepared 4 masterclasses on creating a 2D character animation from scratch, 10 hours of video lessons, practical tasks using professional software, and additional materials that you can use with your own projects. Get the full course now and create your own animated masterpiece.
The year was 1854, and the SS Arctic, the fastest passenger liner of its time, set out to cross the Atlantic. As it sailed through the misty veil, it slowly disappeared into the unknown. The Collins Line, an American shipping company, was started in 1818 and only began seriously trading in the transatlantic by 1835. Its steamships crossed the Atlantic from Liverpool to New York within just 10 days. Doesn't sound like a great speed today, I know, but back then, the same thing took other ships several weeks. Light on the water with their wooden hulls, powering through with a strong steam engine, those steamships were the favorite choice for many high-profile people. What could go wrong with such an advanced ship, they thought. This reminds me of some other ship everyone believed to be unsinkable. But anyway, back to the Collins Line. It grew to be a serious contender on transatlantic routes, with only one other competitor, the Cunard's Line. It was a British company also aiming to be the main force through the Arctic Passage. In 1835, the company received a new ship that traveled to Liverpool and came back to New York with the largest cargo ever at that time. From then, the Collins Line was steadily growing. It seemed like there would only be future successes for it. Unfortunately, their lavish ships became costly to run with the amount of coal used. Massive power along with weak wooden hulls meant they needed many repairs after each voyage. So, every trip ended up being expensive. But since the ships were safe and had a great reputation, people were willing to pay the price, and the company was definitely not in crisis. They had achieved something no one had managed to do before them. Like I told you, their ships crossed the Atlantic in a whopping 10 days, and Edward Collins, the owner, was very determined to maintain the pace. Their 5 ships easily outran the Cunard's Line of only 3. With this great praise, it provided more attention. Though the Cunard's ships were slower with their iron hulls, they believed there was still profit, regardless of how slowly they sailed. Among Collins' ships, the Arctic, the third of them to be launched, was the largest, reaching 284 feet long, with 2 side-lever steam engines, each with 1,000 horsepower. The paddle wheels made 16 revolutions a minute when at full speed. At the time of its launch, the press called it the most stupendous vessel ever constructed in the United States. But glamour and fame couldn't avoid what would come next. On the 27th of September, the Arctic was on its journey from Liverpool to New York. continuing a speed pace through the thick fog. It's possible that by that moment, after 4 years of record-breaking trips, the crew became overconfident with their sailing and the ship. Going only 50 miles from Newfoundland, they carelessly continued through the fog with no radio contact, sonar, or any other form of identifying objects, equipped only with Morse code. A smaller ship, the SS Vesta, which operated as a fishing vessel, often worked around Newfoundland. It was passing through the same path as the Arctic and crashed into its side. Shocked by the collision, the captain of the Arctic offered help to the much smaller Vesta, but it was soon clear that the damage that seemed minor on the Arctic was far worse. Beneath the waterline, a hole was letting water into the hull. The cost of the much faster wooden hull now seemed less valuable. They steered toward land, trying to plug the holes, but they weren't doing so well, and the seawater continued to pour in, filling up higher and pushing the ship down. And finally, once the engine room was full, it put out the boilers, taking away the massive power the Arctic was once legendary for. They moved slowly until coming to a complete stop. The ship continued to sink, and the order was to abandon it. At the time, maritime law allowed for the Arctic to carry only 6 lifeboats, only capable of saving 180 people. The crew and some of the passengers managed to push their way aboard and took most of the seats on those boats. Things were pretty wild, and everyone forgot about their manners, not letting the ladies and the youngest ones board first. It took 4 hours for the Arctic to sink. 150 crew and 250 passengers were on board. Those that weren't able to find a lifeboat made a desperate attempt to build their own rafts from parts of the ship. 2 days later, only 3 boats made it safely to the shore. The other 3 were never found. Believe it or not, the rescue party also saved some people that had been clinging to the wreckage for 2 days. Unlike the crew, the captain went down with the Arctic, but amazingly survived. He would be only one of 85 people that made it, out of the 400 on board. When the news arrived 2 weeks later, the public responded with great sadness to the losses. Great anger soon followed towards the poor safety measures and the crew. The press published demands to change the laws for more lifeboats. It only made sense to have enough for every person on board a ship. But they ignored those requests. This neglect would lead to more disasters in the future. Enough lifeboats would only come into maritime law some 60 years later, after the disaster of the Titanic. Edward Cullen's wife and 2 children were also aboard the ship and didn't return. He was heartbroken, but didn't stop running his business. The Collins line still had a reputation to uphold, the biggest, fastest, and most luxurious on the Atlantic. Edward Collins would now build an even better ship than any other. It was named the Adriatic, and it was the largest ship in the world, 354 feet long. With 2 alternating steam engines that had never been built of this size. These steam engines at the time were at the height of engineering, though today you can only see them in models and toys. With the new addition of 2 masts, the Adriatic would also be able to sail if needed. Luckily, they made some lessons from the disaster of the Arctic. But before their new ship, the Adriatic, was built, another disaster had occurred. The sister ship of the Arctic had also sunk. They believed this second ship was desperate to stay in front of the Cunard's line and hit an iceberg somewhere during the race. This weird contest took the lives of 141 people. The desperation of Collins and his weakly built hulls pushed the company towards bankruptcy in 1858. The newly built Adriatic, costing over $1 million, had only made 1 voyage in the end. And even that voyage was considered a disaster. The ship collided with a tugboat. It still managed to finish its maiden voyage at a suitable time. After the company had gone bankrupt, they had to sell the ship for only $50,000. They removed the great giant engines, replacing them with only sails. Although it was once the greatest ship on the high seas, it was only 30 years later until it was abandoned, labeled irreparable, and anchored in a river. The other remaining ships were also sold and only used for parts. Edward Collins left the industry altogether, seeking work on dry land instead. As the Collins line was no longer in the mix, the Cunards would grow in strength. Without competition, they would win the Blue Riband for the next 30 years, and 180 years later, after producing hundreds of ships. They still have a constant presence on the seas as they provide transatlantic crossings, world voyages, and leisure cruises. To this day, the Cunard line is the only one to run ships between Europe and America, and it's great proof that it's not always the fastest that's the best.
It's June of 1857. A fierce storm slams into Gechen Bay, Australia, and rips apart a Dutch ship weighing 800 tons. Part of the crew tries to escape in a small boat, but only 9 of the 25 men on board survive. Now, many years later, researchers believe they've found this long-lost gold rush shipwreck. Yep, this ship is tied to one of the most dramatic high-stakes chapters in Australia's history. We're talking about the shipwreck of Koning Willem de Tweede, a vessel built back in 1840. This historic ship discovery is a big deal since it's now considered a real treasure in the world of underwater archaeology in Australia. Let me tell you why. By the middle of the 19th century, Dutch ships were carrying not just goods, but also people from Asia who were hoping to start a new life in Australia. And they were all chasing one thing: gold. Yep, the precious metal was discovered in Australia in 1851. Well, officially at least. It was actually found a few years earlier, but let's just say the authorities decided to keep that little detail away from the newspapers. Anyway, the big public discovery happened in 1851 when an Australian gold prospector named Edward Hammond Hargraves led an expedition in the New South Wales region, and he chose to tell everyone about his find. And just like that, the gold rush began. News spreads fast, so people start arriving from everywhere: Britain, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, and also from China. It's estimated by that time around 20,000 Chinese had made their way to the goldfields in Victoria. By 1861, about 3% of the Australian population had been born in the Asian country. Most of them came from the southern region of Guangdong, which was going through a really tough time back then. They'd been through it all: foreign invasions, massive floods, serious food shortages, you name it. Many people had lost everything. Their money was gone, their homes destroyed. They couldn't even afford a bite to eat. There was no clear way out of the poverty they were stuck in. But then, word started to spread. There was a goldfield somewhere in a distant British territory. They heard stories from people all over the world going there, that it was peaceful, full of opportunity, and that the land itself had everything you could need. It sounded like a dream. Before long, they began calling it Xinjin Shan, or New Gold Mountain. So, many scraped together what little they had left to reach Australia and start over. It was a shot at a better life, a chance to lift entire families out of poverty. But getting there wasn't cheap or easy. They had to travel in huge ships, and the average trip from Guangdong province took about 3 months to reach Sydney or Melbourne. At some point, Australian authorities decided to impose a tax on Chinese arrivals. Every passenger who disembarked at Victorian ports had to pay a £10 poll tax. So what do you think happened? The routes changed, of course. Instead of docking directly in Victoria, ships began stopping in Robe, a town in the southeastern part of South Australia. From there, people would walk about 250 miles all the way to the goldfields, just to avoid paying the tax. And this area is exactly where the Koning Willem de Tweede was discovered. Yep, our Dutch ship was found off the Robe coast, and it was one of many vessels that carried Chinese passengers to Australia. Now you can see why it's historically important, right? On the 16th of June, 1857, it brought around 400 people safely to shore so they could start their lives over. The ship itself didn't get a happy ending though. After dropping them off, it was supposed to continue its journey, but then a storm rolled in. So the ship had to drop anchor and wait it out in Geechin Bay. The weather kept getting worse. The anchor began to drag, and by the 13th of June, it was completely lost. The captain, called Hendrik Geisen, had to act fast. He made the call to beach the ship in hopes of saving both the vessel and his crew. But there was a problem. The ship ran aground on Long Beach, about 3 miles east of Robe, and it started breaking apart quickly in the rough seas. The rest of the story is tragic. 16 sailors drowned when one of the ship's small boats turned upside down. Only 9 men made it out alive. Captain Geisen stayed aboard the wreck. He eventually reached the shore by clinging to a cask. Thankfully, people who were on the beach managed to pull him out of the sea using a rope. A few months later, things from the wreck were sold to a local man in Robe named Jacob Chambers for £225, which was a pretty big amount of money back then. And that's because people were able to save a good amount of stuff from the wreck, like the bell, some doors, and wooden planks from the hull. Those doors and some of the timbers were later used to build the Caledonian Inn, a historic 2-story stone hotel that went up in 1859. As for the bell, it was supposedly used at Robe Primary School for over 100 years, but researchers aren't so sure about that part. What we do know is that most of the ship's remains were still missing, until now. After 3 years of hard work, a team affiliated with the Australian National Maritime Museum believes they have finally found the Koning Willem de Tweede. The project kicked off in April of 2022, and its main goal has been to search for, locate, and carry out an archaeological survey of the shipwreck's remains. To do that, they mainly used 2 tools: underwater metal detectors and a marine magnetometer, a device that detects changes in the magnetic field of the seafloor. Soon, this technology started picking up a bunch of anomalies in the area where the shipwreck was believed to be. And by anomalies, I mean weird signals. Clues that something might be buried under the seabed, probably hidden under layers of sand or mud. They believe those signals were coming from the iron parts of the ship's windlass. That's a big winch at the front of the ship used to pull up the anchors. Some of those pieces were sticking up slightly from the seabed, along with a partially exposed iron frame. They also spotted a well-preserved wooden plank underneath the windlass, which suggests that more of the ship's hull is still down there, just buried under the sand. So why do they feel confident that this wreck is the Koning Willem de Tweede? Well, basically for 3 reasons. First, the location. The spot where they picked up those signals lines up with historical accounts of where the ship went down. And it just so happens to be the only known shipwreck in that part of Long Beach. Second, the size. The cluster of magnetic signals roughly matches the ship's documented length, which is about 140 feet. Third and last reason, they found pieces of Chinese pottery from the 1800s right on the beach next to the site. When you put all those facts together, it basically screams Koning Willem de Tweede. That's why the team feels so confident they've finally discovered this historic ship. But even though they have good reasons to believe it, more research still needs to be done, so they're planning future visits to the site to keep monitoring things. The goal is to check the ship's condition and look for more parts of the hull or artifacts that might get uncovered as the seabed shifts over time. Let's hope they get lucky next time around. For years, the world's most valuable shipwreck was just a legend, until now. It has finally been found, and among the wreckage was a real treasure worth $1.1 billion. To understand this better, we need to go back to 1622. That year, the mighty Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de Atocha set sail from Havana, packed with riches belonging both to King Philip IV of Spain and to the wealthy members of the crew. We're talking about gold, silver, copper, and emeralds from Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and Venezuela. The cargo was so large, totaling more than 40 tons, and so vast that it took 2 months to transport it to the ship. The ship was also packed with people. There were 265 people on board. At first, everything went well, but then came the Florida Straits and trouble. The crew found themselves lost in the night that was not only cold, but also stormy. And before long, they were facing a powerful hurricane. The wind tore the masts apart. Giant waves destroyed the rudder, and soon, the Atocha was sinking toward the darkness of the seabed. The disaster that night meant a huge loss of wealth for King Philip IV, but even worse was the loss of life. Of the original 265 crew members, only 5 survived. They managed to climb up the mizzen of the ship, the only part that remained above water. With all that treasure gone, the Spanish were quick to spring into action and devised a salvage operation. 5 ships were sent to recover the cargo. The plan seemed simple and easy. After all, the hatches were securely locked, so the treasure could still be there. But almost immediately, things went wrong. For example, one of the 5 ships ran aground before it could even begin its journey. In the end, the search dragged on for 60 years, and many factors contributed to the mission's failure. That may not seem so bad today, but back then, divers didn't have the technology or safety equipment that we have today. Exploring the seabed was risky, and more often than not, it led nowhere. While searching for the Atocha, the rescuers found traces of another vessel, the Santa Margarita, the Atocha's sister ship. Another hurricane passed through the region a month after the sinking. The seabed became a jigsaw puzzle with pieces of the ship scattered everywhere. The rescue mission became almost impossible. Over time, the Spanish managed to recover part of the Santa Margarita's cargo, but Atocha's treasure seemed lost forever. Even so, no one forgot that story. Then in 1969, more than 300 years after the sinking, everything began to change. An experienced deep-sea diver, Mel Fisher, stepped in and decided to rewrite history. Mel had already spent a big part of his life at the bottom of the sea. He and his wife even ran a diving school in California. So, Mel gathered his family and moved to the other side of the country. He led a new team of hunters whose mission was clear: to find the lost treasure of the legendary Atocha. They had little more than a boat, some diving equipment, and metal detectors, but that was enough to get them started. They focused on a region called the Matacumbe Keys, mentioned in several 17th century documents. In the first year, they traveled more than 100,000 miles but found absolutely nothing. It seemed like an impossible dream. But Mel still had a card up his sleeve. Eugene Lyon, a historian who would change the course of the search. Eugene delved into the Spanish archives in search of clues about the shipwreck. It was there that he found an important document that mentioned a group of people trying to save it. On the last page, it was mentioned that an area 100 miles from where Mel was searching had been the scene of the main exploration. This little piece of information was the needle in the haystack they needed. They rerouted the ship and soon arrived at the new location. But there was a challenge. That part of the ocean was deeper and the visibility there was almost zero. It was difficult to see your own hands. However, Mel knew how to deal with the adversities of diving and came up with a simple and brilliant solution. He installed 2 large tubes on the boat called letterboxes. Those tubes could be lowered in front of the propellers. The idea was ingenious. They sucked clean water from the surface and directed it to the bottom of the sea, exactly where the divers were. This technique not only cleared the murky water, but also helped to reveal objects that had been hidden for centuries. And still, the search took 16 years. During that time, Fisher found many lost items. Then, in 1971, they discovered a huge anchor. This was the first clue that they were close to finding the Atocha. In the following days, more objects appeared. Cups, swords, and ancient nails turned up. To keep everything organized, the team created a circular map. On it, they marked the exact location of each item they found. They also used radio transmitters on land and a receiver on the boat, which allowed them to know precisely where they were. The system was so efficient that it could measure the position with a margin of error of just 1 foot. Over time, a line began to form on the map, pointing to where the Atocha's main treasure might be hidden. They followed this trail for 2 years. Just when they were starting to lose hope, they found silver bars. It was the year 1973. This opened the door to much bigger discoveries. The silver alone was worth over $100,000, but the real treasure was yet to come. On July 20th, 1985, valuables that would be worth around $1.1 billion today were finally discovered in the main hull of the ship. The treasure included 180,000 silver coins, 24 tons of silver bars, 125 gold bars, a collection of pearls, and 66 pounds of emeralds. Some of these finds were priceless, not only because they were rare, but because of their history. The Atocha Cross, the Royal Orb, and the Atocha Ring, 3 royal artifacts, were found in near-perfect condition. The Atocha Cross was the most valuable of all the artifacts. It had 9 brilliant green emeralds set in 22-karat gold. A true treasure from the past, shining once again after centuries underwater. Soon after the discovery, the state of Florida thought, wait a second, we want a piece of that treasure. They went to court, demanding a whopping 25% of the value. A bitter legal battle ensued, and it lasted 8 years. It even went all the way to the Supreme Court. But in the end, treasure hunter Mel emerged victorious. He was even invited to The Tonight Show, showing off a massive gold chain found in the wreckage, wrapped around his waist like a belt. People called it the money chain, and for good reason. The find was so big that the wreck was declared the world's most valuable by the Guinness Book of Records in 2014. After the initial excitement, Mel sold some of the gems, but the bulk of the treasure remained in the family for a while. What was left was auctioned off. No one knows exactly how much the jewels were sold for, but one thing is for sure. Their value has skyrocketed over the years, and it's not just about the sparkle, it's about the legend that lives behind them. Today, these treasures are part of the particular Muzo collection, the largest private collection of the Atocha artifacts in the world. And no, they're not for sale. But the good news is that you can still see them. They're on display, shining brightly in homage to Colombia's rich history and the famous mine from which they came. The people behind them say that these emeralds are as iconic as the rubies of Mogok or the sapphires of Kashmir. And honestly, they're right. By April 1912, the Titanic was the most expensive and unsinkable ship in the world. These days, the sunken Titanic is associated with some of the most expensive expedition tours in the world. Despite the terrible tragedy, people have built profitable businesses using the famous ship. And these businesses can be very dangerous. The Titanic fell to the bottom of the icy waters of the North Atlantic in 1912. It was more than 70 years before people finally discovered the ship. It happened in the 80s, when researcher Robert Ballard carried out a secret mission to search for sunken submarines. In addition to his mission, Ballard also wanted to search for the wreckage of the Titanic if he had the time. In short, he did find the Titanic. This discovery became the beginning of big profits, fighting for customers, lawsuits, and the destruction of the wreckage. Shortly after the discovery, Ballard came to the US Congress and testified about the Titanic he'd found. He suggested making a sea memorial out of the wreck's site and leaving this place untouched. In 1986, Ballard installed a plaque on the Titanic, and the story ended there. But not for long. The Titanic tragedy was a popular theme, so many companies realized they could make a lot of money out of it. In 1987, an American company, Titanic Ventures, descended to the wreckage together with the French National Institute of Oceanography and got about 1,800 artifacts from there. Then the company received the rights from the US government to rescue the Titanic by parts. Over the course of several years, they made several other expeditions and took more than 2,000 artifacts. The company created a museum where it exhibited the found jewelry, interior elements, personal belongings of passengers, and a lot more. Some artifacts were put up for auction. The company made good profits and inspired many others to do the same. For example, let's take a look at this pocket watch. It belonged to a guy named Edmund Stone, who was a first-class steward. The watch stopped at 2:15 a.m. when it fell into the icy ocean water. After almost 100 years, it was sold for 130,000 euros, which is about $135,000, and is far from the highest price. Another item is the Titanic's ship plan. This is one of the most authentic artifacts from the ship, and it had a practical use. Experts used this blueprint to investigate the wreckage. It helped them understand where the iceberg had struck the Titanic. This plan was sold at auction for $320,000. Do you remember that moment in the movie when the ship began to sink and the violinists started playing their last song? It was actually true. There were real musicians on board who were playing till the end. One of them was Wallace Hartley. Unfortunately, he didn't survive the disaster, but his violin did. Even though it's impossible to play it, it was sold for $1.5 million. In general, as you understand, the hunt for the Titanic's artifacts turned out to be quite profitable. Then, director James Cameron came down to the Titanic. In 1997, he released his famous movie with the same name, and the popularity of the Titanic soared. Collecting the artifacts was no longer so interesting. People wanted to go down to the famous ship on their own. The high demand provided a good supply. In 1998, British company Deep Ocean Expeditions organized tours to the Titanic for only $32,500. From that time until 2012, the company conducted 197 dives to the wreckage of the ship, and during this time, the ticket price doubled. The company Titanic Ventures, which was the first to get an artifact from the sunken ship, later received the name RMS Titanic Inc., and it sued Deep Ocean Expeditions because it believed that its exclusive rights to salvage the ship's artifacts prevented other companies from conducting underwater tours. RMS Titanic won the court case and banned Deep Ocean from conducting expeditions, but this decision was overturned in 1999. In short, litigation and fights between competitors began. People continued to go down to the seabed to see the legendary ship. There were other companies that organized their own tours. Tourists descended to the Titanic inside underwater bathyscaphs. In 2001, an American couple had a wedding inside an underwater vessel that floated next to the Titanic deck. The profit was growing, customers were coming, and everything was fine, not counting the Titanic itself. The more tourists came down to the ship, the more damaged it got. People wanted not only to see, but also to touch the wreckage. The bathyscaphs could accidentally hit the ship and break apart its parts. The churning of the water caused by boat propellers could also damage the old ship. During one expedition, a bathyscaph crashed into the Titanic, but those who did it kept silent about this incident. In addition, the seabed where the ship lies is littered with garbage. Bottles, chains, weights, nets that people left during rescue operations and tourism. More than 100 years after the tragedy, the Titanic has finally received UNESCO protection. This means that many countries have received the right to prohibit going down to the Titanic, taking artifacts from there and selling them. The saddest thing is that this hype around the Titanic led to another tragedy. In 2023, OceanGate Expeditions conducted a tour on a submarine with 5 people. This was the famous Titan bathyscaph you've probably heard about. So, the Titan began its dive to the Titanic, and after 1 hour and 45 minutes, communication with the bathyscaph was lost. Something broke in the boat, depressurization started, and in a split second, the huge water pressure crushed the Titan. Despite the danger of such a dive, there are many people who want to go on an expedition to the Titanic to see the ship with their own eyes.
They're not even deterred by the price of such a tour, which has increased by several times. But for those who don't have several $100,000, oceanographers and divers have created a digital copy of the sunken Titanic. Using a computer, you can visit the ship, walk through its halls, cabins, and deck. The copy has preserved some parts of the ship which don't exist anymore. For example, the famous railings on the ship's bow where Leonardo DiCaprio hugged Kate Winslet have recently collapsed. And you can also visit museums dedicated to the Titanic. There, you'll see various photos, elements of the ship, personal belongings of passengers, and many other artifacts. Anyway, if you have a lot of money and you still want to go down to the Titanic, think twice. And in general, ordinary scuba diving is a rather dangerous thing. These are the problems it can cause. When you dive underwater without preparation and come up too fast, you're likely to encounter decompression sickness, which is also called the bends. Due to the rapid decrease in the pressure that surrounds you, nitrogen bubbles move through the body and might cause paralysis, severe discomfort, spinal cord damage, and many other troubles. Wait a minute, what are nitrogen bubbles doing in your body anyway? Your cylinders contain compressed gas that consists of nitrogen and oxygen. And when you inhale this substance and the pressure around you sharply decreases, nitrogen accumulates in bubbles. According to Henry's law, the solubility of gases in a liquid is directly proportional to the external pressure. The liquid is flowing in your veins and arteries, and the external pressure is tons of seawater around you. Any change in your body pressure can also cause loss of consciousness, and underwater depths are not the best place to faint. Check out on YouTube what happens to people who don't adhere to safety regulations and experience the bends. You'll see that this is a rather unpleasant feeling. What if you get a bad instructor, or you panic and start rising too fast? Or the depth might turn out greater than you expected. Of course, when you're inside a bathyscaphe, looking at the Titanic through the window, you feel much more comfortable. But if you're going to scuba dive to big depths, good preparation is vital for you.
If we're happy enough finding a few bucks we forgot about in our pockets, just imagine stumbling across $13 million in a place you'd never expect. That's exactly what happened to a group of diamond miners working in the Namibian desert. In 2008, they found this incredible treasure inside a shipwreck that happened over 500 years ago, and the story behind this abandoned vessel is packed with mysteries. It all started back in 1533, when the Portuguese built this special trading ship. This model was believed to be a part of a newer class of vessels that were bigger, more efficient, and tougher than the ones that came before. Portugal really needed that, since they were dominating trade all over the seas at the time. So the main purpose of this ship was to support those long-distance expeditions during this super prosperous era. On March 7th, the Portuguese decided to test their impressive new ship, and on that fresh spring day, big vessels sailed down the Tagus River and out into the Atlantic, with flags flying and colorful fabrics draping from their tall masts. Off they went, leaving Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, and heading for Western India. At least, that's what researchers think, since this was a pretty common route for them back then. Most of the time, the Portuguese were after spices. In the early 1500s, it was pretty hard to find things like cinnamon, ginger, cloves, black pepper, and turmeric in Europe, so they had to go to India for them. Unfortunately, one of the ships never made it to its final destination. In fact, to the despair of the Portuguese court, this vessel completely vanished, leaving no sign of a shipwreck. And none of the roughly 300 people on board were ever found. Could they have strayed so far off course that they ended up in the Americas or on some island along the way? Well, anything was possible, and the ship, along with the mystery of its disappearance, became legendary. Fast forward over 500 years to 2008. Diamond miners were doing their thing on a coast near Oranienburg when they started finding some strange stuff while digging.
like pieces of metal, wood, and even odd objects that looked like bronze pipes. That was definitely strange, so they called an archaeologist to figure out what was going on. When the archaeologist arrived, he noticed all sorts of strange bits and old pieces scattered around. Little by little, he began to identify those things. First, elephant tusks. Then a 500-year-old artillery piece. All of a sudden, it hit him. This was definitely a shipwreck. But what the archaeologist didn't realize at the time was that this shipwreck turned out to be one of the most significant ever found. Back then, it wasn't easy at all to convince the mining company that archaeologists had to keep exploring the site. But thankfully, they managed to, because on the 6th day of searching, they spotted a treasure. And they literally filled their hats with over a 25-pound mixture of Spanish and Portuguese gold coins. Turns out, this old abandoned ship was loaded with gold, tin, ivory tusks, and over 40,000 pounds of copper ingots when it met its watery and tragic end. In fact, specialists believe that the copper ingots played a key role in keeping the wreck so well preserved. The first reason is kind of obvious. The copper ingots weighing everything down, keeping the shipwreck remnants at the bottom of the ocean. And that was great, as 5 centuries of storms and waves would have washed everything away. But copper ingots were also important for another reason. Fish and other sea creatures might feast on wood, jute sacks, and leather shoes. But copper really ruins their appetite, which means a lot of stuff survived those 500 years at the bottom of the sea that it really shouldn't have. So yeah, against all odds, the treasure was preserved and in excellent condition. The gold looked shiny and intact. While it's impossible to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they had just found the legendary Portuguese vessel, all the evidence points to the fact that, yes, they did. One piece of evidence comes from an old Portuguese book that says that between 1525 and 1600, 21 ships were lost on the way to India, and one of them actually sank somewhere near Namibia, getting lost on the turn of the Cape of Good Hope. Bingo! From that point on, experts have been going over the wreckage, measuring, photographing, and scanning the site millimeter by millimeter with a high-tech 3-dimensional laser scanner. Their goal was to figure out what happened to this ship, or at least get closer to the truth. The first question they had to answer was, why was this ship so close to the coast of Namibia? We're talking about great sailors who probably knew that that stretch of coast was famous for its storms and fog. What happened then? It seems that 4 months or so after its grand departure from Lisbon, the fleet was struck and scattered by a huge storm. So the most likely explanation is that the combination of bad weather and heavy cargo forced the captain to run the ship aground on purpose. According to one theory, he dropped the front anchors and slowly beached the ship. Then it hit an underwater rock in the surf, rolled over in the big waves, and all attempts to free it failed. It began to break apart, starting with the upper structure. At that point, the treasure chest fell out of the captain's cabin and sank down to the seabed. It eventually got crushed and pinned down, but it was also protected by a big piece of the ship's side that broke off when the hull fell apart. Okay, but what about the people on board? Winter storms along the Namibian coast can be brutal, with winds over 80 miles an hour and huge waves, making it nearly impossible to get ashore. But if the storm calmed down at some point, it is possible that the shipwreck had survivors. I mean, some human toe bones were indeed found, suggesting at least one person didn't make it, but these were the only human remains that were recovered. There weren't many personal belongings found either, which leads archaeologists to think that most people on board likely made it to land despite the ship breaking apart. But we can't really say this was a happy ending. Yes, most of them might have survived the shipwreck, but they ended up in one of the harshest places on Earth. An empty stretch of sand and scrub for hundreds of miles. It was winter, so they were cold, wet, and exhausted, with no hope of rescue. Nobody knew they were alive or where to find them. Plus, no ships were likely to pass by, since they were far off the usual routes. Going back to Portugal seemed impossible. After the first round of exploration, researchers found that the ship's remains were scattered across 3 large sections along the coast of Namibia. In the end, more than 40 tons of cargo were recovered from the site, and thousands of different artifacts were found and cataloged, including lead, tin, textiles, and even some astronomical instruments. So, you might be asking, who got the gold? I'll just say that it didn't go to the miners or the archaeologists. According to the researchers involved, every single coin was handed over to the Namibian government. After all, that is the usual procedure for random ships found on the beach. But this case wasn't that simple, as there is an exception to this rule. If the ship found is a state ship, the country that owns it has the right to receive the treasure. In other words, everything they found inside this old abandoned vessel actually belonged to Portugal, no matter that it all happened ages ago. But the Portuguese leaders apparently allowed Namibia to take the lot.
If I asked you to name the most famous shipwreck of all time, you'd go with the Titanic, right? The Atlantic Ocean, the hope for new life, heartbreaking love stories. It had it all to become a blockbuster. But I guess you've never heard of SS Princess Alice that submerged in the sewage of the River Thames, taking between 600 and 700 lives with it. Life in 19th century Victorian London wasn't easy, especially for working class folks. Affordable public transport and bank holidays made it a bit easier. The people could escape to the coast on a train or pleasure boat, even if it was just for a day. Sheerness on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent started as a fort under Henry VIII and then grew into a bustling town with a dockyard. When they added a railway station in 1863, it became a prime destination for day trippers and holidaymakers. Seaside promenades, charming piers, and a whole bunch of fun stuff to do by the sea. It had it all. A bit inland along the River Thames, you had the Rocherville Gardens. These gardens had archery lawns, bowls, mazes, lakes, cliff walks, and even a floral bazaar. Plus, there was an aviary, a bear pit, and a skeleton of a lost whale that had taken a wrong turn in the Thames. Londoners of the late 19th century could hop on a train or cruise along the Thames by boat, and both options were pretty popular. But on the 3rd of September, 1878, way more people than usual opted for the boat. They chose it over the railroad after a passenger train had collided with goods wagons in Kent, taking the lives of 5 people. The river felt like a safer way to go. One of the ships available for the trip was the SS Princess Alice. The paddle steamer was first launched in 1865 on the west coast of Scotland. Its original name was the Bute, and it was used as a ferry for the passengers of the Weems Bay Railway Company. A couple of years later, it was sold and renamed after Queen Victoria's 3rd child. Then, it was sold again and got the nickname the Shah's Boat, as it transported the Shah of Persia up the Thames to Greenwich in 1873. The ship had gone through several alterations in its lifetime. It got new boilers and watertight bulkheads. The Board of Trade had inspected it and marked it safe. In the year of its final voyage, it was officially allowed to carry up to 936 passengers between London and Gravesend in calm water. On the day of the tragedy, Princess Alice was on what was called a moonlight trip downstream from Swan Pier near London Bridge to Sheerness, Kent and back. The trip wasn't expensive, so most of the passengers were from the working class. There was also a musical band aboard to keep the spirits up. The 3rd of September was a bright day, and many families were happy they could catch some final summer sun rays and enjoy fresh sea air. The then owner of the ship, the London Steamboat Company, had several vessels working on the route. The passengers were free to hop on and off different ships. At around 6:30 p.m., after a beautiful day in the open, the SS Princess Alice headed back to Swan Pier. No one kept official lists of passengers, so we'll never know exactly how many people were on board that evening. But they say the steamer was close to its full capacity. As it got darker and cooler, many families decided to stay inside the saloon or in their cabins below. Some stories from the steamer sound like fate. The captain of Princess Alice let his steerer stay at Gravesend and replaced him with one of the passengers. John Ayres was a sailor but had little experience at the Thames or with a vessel like Princess Alice. Alfred Thomas Merriman, a chef from East London, had been offered to work on the steamer at the last moment. He was 30 years old and a father of 4, so he couldn't say no to extra money. At around 7:40 p.m., he was standing on the deck by the saloon door. By that time, Princess Alice had passed Tripcock Point and entered Galleon's Reach. The passengers could see the North Woolwich Pier in the distance. Many of them planned to disembark at that stop. And that's when Merriman noticed a huge ship carrying coal. It was Bywell Castle. This vessel normally carried coal to Africa, but it had just been repainted at a dry dock. Bywell Castle was going to Newcastle to pick up some coal and transport it to Alexandria, Egypt. The ship's captain, Harrison, wasn't too familiar with these waters, so he called in Christopher Dix, a seasoned Thames River pilot, to lend a hand, even though he didn't have to. The ship had a fancy raised forward part below the deck, and Dix couldn't quite see what was in front of him. So, they had a sailor on lookout duty. As they set sail from Millwall at the speed of 5 knots, 5.7 miles per hour, they tried to stick to the middle of the river, but other boats had other plans. When they were approaching Galleon's Reach, Dick spotted Princess Alice's red port light, headed their way, but planning to pass on the right side. At the same time, Grinstead, the captain of Princess Alice, was going against the river's flow, trying to find the smooth waters on the south side. He adjusted his course, steering into Bywell Castle's path. Both crews realized they were headed for a collision. Dix tried to steer clear and even ordered reverse full speed on the engines, but it was too late. The Bywell Castle collided head-on with the Princess Alice, which was much smaller, weighing less than a third of the 890-ton coal-carrying collier. It sliced the passenger steamer in two. As Merriman remembered later, laughter on board immediately changed into screaming and panic. Some people rushed to the bridge for safety. Merriman hurried to the captain, asking what to do next. The captain's response was grim. "We are sinking fast. Do your best." The ends of the steamer went high into the air, and the middle just sank, taking passengers with it. Those unfortunate ones who were below deck were tragically trapped. The impact caused tons of untreated sewage to gush from outlets near the collision site. The water became a frothy mess of unprocessed waste with a horrible odor. It was potent enough to make even the most resilient sailors retch. Amid the chaos, passengers struggled for life in the contaminated water. They inhaled lungfuls of hazardous waste without knowing. The crew aboard the Bywell Castle sprang into action. They dropped ropes from their deck, urging Princess Alice's passengers to climb aboard. Anything that could float, from planks to barrels, was tossed into the water to serve as flotation devices for those in need. Other members of their team launched a lifeboat, saving 14 people. Nearby boats, moored along the riverbanks, joined the mission, plucking survivors from the water. Many of Princess Alice's passengers didn't know how to swim, and it was even trickier for ladies wearing long, heavy dresses. Merriman was among the lucky ones who could swim. He first held on to a piece of wreckage, and then, when others got to it, swam away and caught onto a rope hanging over the side of the Bywell Castle. They managed to save around 130 people this way. Another survivor was Robert Haynes, who played in the Princess Alice band. He was fond of ships and had noticed the Bywell Castle a couple of minutes before the collision. He chose not to follow the rest of the band, who went downstairs for a break, and that saved his life. Princess Alice's sister ship, Duke of Teck, arrived 10 minutes too late to assist with the rescue efforts. Only 2 people who had been below deck or in the saloon managed to survive the collision. We still don't know the total count of lives taken on that day, but it's somewhere between 650 and 700. And what makes this story even more tragic is that it has been mostly forgotten.
Imagine you're driving across a bridge to visit a friend. The next day, you get in your car to go back, but there is no longer a river under the bridge you drove across yesterday. Believe it or not, this is exactly what happened to people in the south of Honduras when Category 5 Hurricane Mitch hit in October 1998. Choluteca Bridge, which the local authorities reconstructed earlier that year, was left in the dry, as the river now flowed around it, not under it. The structure soon became famous online as the Bridge to Nowhere. This waterway shifted its course overnight, but it normally happens over longer spans of time. A river will stop flowing straight when there is even the tiniest change in the landscape around it. Even something as tiny as a mouse can weaken a riverbank. Imagine a family of mice decides to start a home somewhere by the river and digs a cozy hole. Over time, water gets inside this hole and starts washing away any loose soil. Give it a couple of centuries, and the river will now have a bend in this place. And if you're worried about the mice family, don't be, because they moved out a long time before the water flooded their home. Things happen even faster for small streams because, well, their beds are also smaller. The current breaks down stones, the ground takes them in, and voila, a riverbed or bottom is formed. The current is the strongest in the middle of the waterway, and its power directly shapes the riverbed. The water flowing through rivers is full of soil and other particles. All this stuff goes from the spring into the mouth of a river and into Earth's oceans. In some cases, these particles build up at some point. And that's how new beaches, probably including your favorite, are born from fine-grained sand. On the other side of the river, the flow of water is much faster, so this fast-moving current literally slams against the next bank. Then, the process of erosion starts all over again. River erosion is what happens when the flowing water takes away soil. And I have to tell you, things go super fast there. That water is so energetic, it can even carve into rocks, creating a canyon. If the riverbanks consist of loose material, such as humus, that's the soil you plant a flower in, then it is easier for the flowing water to erode it. Rivers in the plains are often wide and slow because there's little resistance from the ground around them. So you don't have to worry about waves tipping over your boat on a flatland river. In the mountains, streams quickly wash away all the surface soil and gravel, revealing the bedrock beneath them. It's tightly bound, so mountain streams are literally set in stone, as they cannot wash away this bedrock. So we have erosion to blame for waterways changing their course, and also mountains and hills. When a stream reaches a mountain or simply a rock, it has two choices: to flow around it or carve its way through it. In flatlands, rivers don't have any natural competition, so they choose a more winding path. All this twisting and turning increases the river's total length from the source to the mouth. One such example is the mighty Mississippi River in the U.S. It has a lot of curves and bends, which are called meanders. In the last century and a half alone, the Mississippi changed its course several times. The last major case was in 1876 when it left the historic city of Vicksburg in the dry. 2 years later, a team of American engineers came to the area to construct the Yazoo Diversion Canal, which took 25 years to complete. Thanks to it, ships could once again sail to Vicksburg, reviving the town's economy. What happened in this southern U.S. town in the 19th century is an ordinary natural consequence of river erosion. The bends in a waterway grow sharper over time, making the water flow faster. This speeds up erosion, and individual bends slowly start approaching each other to the point they merge. When this happens, the river straightens up overnight, leaving a lake in the form of a horseshoe in the place where the bend was. This newly formed body of water is called an oxbow lake. These still water lakes either dry up, since they're no longer fed by a spring, or they turn into swamps. In some cases, humans use them as water meadows used for agriculture. Lake Shakot in Arkansas is the largest oxbow lake in North America, formed by the Mississippi several centuries ago. The source of the Mississippi is a lake in Minnesota, but a river can also start when two other watercourses become one, or when the water simply bubbles up from under the ground. Even melting snow can feed a river, like the Amazon gets its water from the Andes. Determining the source of a waterway can be tricky, so the debate about whether Amazon or the Nile is longer is still ongoing. What scientists know for certain is that the Amazon carries more water than any other river. 1/5 of all the fresh water that enters Earth's oceans comes from this South American river. When you look at the Amazon River on a map, you'll notice how it flows from Peru to Brazil, that is, from the west to the east. This direction might seem odd when you compare it to the Mississippi, which flows to the south on the map. It's so confusing because you probably know rivers flow down, affected by gravity, but down doesn't automatically mean south. Running water will try to find the easiest route down, so there are no rules in terms of cardinal directions. The Nile River is the best example of this, as it actually flows north into the Mediterranean Sea. Northern Egypt, where all those pyramids are located, is on lower ground than Sudan, where the Nile is formed when the Blue Nile and the White Nile merge. Ob in northern Asia and the Mackenzie River in Canada both flow northwest, while the Yellow River in East Asia flows in the same direction as Amazon, to the east into the Pacific Ocean. These major rivers are some of the best examples that a stream doesn't have to flow from the north to the south. Gravity is the only important factor that determines which way a stream will flow, as running water is all the time pulled downwards. The flow of water is faster on steeper slopes. When there's a sudden drop in the flow, waterfalls form. Angel Falls in Venezuela is the highest waterfall on the planet, with water dropping from a height of 2,600 feet. Watch your step. In a waterfall, the falling water can easily reach the speed of a Thompson's gazelle, but as a river approaches the end of its journey, it slows down significantly. The stream doesn't have enough energy to cut into the nearby land. All the sediment it has picked up along the way, such as sandstone, slows it down. At the place where a river meets the ocean or a lake, it gets rid of this sediment along its banks, creating a delta, an area rich in fertile soil. The Ganges in India has the biggest delta in the world, several hundred miles wide and visible from space. The Amazon, on the other side, doesn't have a true delta because the strong currents of the Atlantic Ocean wash away everything the torrent brings. The deepest section of the riverbed that runs along its middle is called a channel. This is where the current is the strongest, so ships travel on top of these channels. When engineers want to expand a waterway, they simply dig a deeper channel and voila, larger ships can now pass. This is just one way humans alter watercourses. We often strengthen the banks of a river to prevent erosion or build dams that stop or divert the flow of water. The oldest operational dam on the planet dates back to the time of Egyptian pharaohs. It was, of course, the first damn thing.
As an experienced sailor and the first man to ever sail non-stop on his own around North and South America, Matt Rutherford has seen a lot during his voyages. But what he saw in 2013 while sailing through the waters of the Atlantic with his colleague surely stands out. Some 800 miles off the coast of Bermuda, not far away from the famous Bermuda Triangle, they noticed a boat that seemed to be moving by itself. The sails weren't up and the motor wasn't running. The sailors decided to check if there was someone who needed their help aboard, so they moved closer to the mysterious ship. Once they got there, things only got weirder, as they realized there wasn't a living soul aboard. Rutherford started filming to document their discovery. The boat looked so awfully abandoned that they expected to find some pretty scary things in there. But it didn't stop Rutherford from searching the vessel. The boat, which turned out to be named Wolfhound, looked like an upscale one, probably costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was pretty weird to find it floating by itself in the middle of the ocean. It seemed like whoever abandoned it was leaving in a rush. There were clothes and other personal belongings all over the main cabin. Some parts of the ceiling had fallen and some drawers had popped open. The brave sailors decided to tow the ghost ship back to Bermuda. It wasn't easy because Wolfhound was bigger and heavier than their boat. After days at sea, the crew was running low on fuel and asked a passing freighter to stop and give them some gas. They kept pulling Wolfhound until the tow line got wrapped around the rudder and they realized they could get stranded in the Bermuda Triangle. So they had to abandon the ship. What really happened and how Wolfhound ended up in the middle of the ocean will probably remain a mystery. Rumor has it that it belonged to a member of the Royal Irish Yacht Club. The ship was going on its first voyage from Connecticut to Bermuda and then Antigua. It got in a terrible storm around 400 miles away from Delaware. The winds were so strong that the yacht suffered 2 knockdowns. A Greek cargo ship rescued the crew. They left the ship with an emergency beacon on. The rescued crew members shared that they saw the ship sink, which only adds more questions to the story. How did it get back to the surface? Does the Bermuda Triangle have anything to do with that? Christopher Columbus himself reported some unusual compass activity going on in this mysterious area while he was on his way to the New World. Despite the stories of more than 50 ships and 20 planes disappearing in the area, it remains one of the most heavily traveled shipping routes in the world. Some skeptics believe that this fact solves the Bermuda Triangle mystery. It could make sense because the busier the area, the more accidents happen there. But then again, it's not the number of disappearances that makes the place so mysterious. It's the lack of explanation and wreckage lost for good. The first ever confirmed ship to vanish in the Bermuda Triangle was the USS Pickering. In 1800, it departed from the US on its way to the West Indies. The ship sailed into the Bermuda Triangle along with its 90-man crew. No one ever heard anything from them ever since. The popular explanation is that the ship was taken out by a storm. But because no one found any wreckage, we'll never know for sure. The largest ship that has ever disappeared in this mysterious area was the USS Cyclops. In March 1918, carrying a crew of 306 people, the USS Cyclops left Barbados and headed home to Baltimore. The ship passed through the Bermuda Triangle on its journey and vanished into thin air, or rather, water. The Cyclops never sent any distress signal and disappeared without any explanation or trace. The Bermuda Triangle isn't the only place in the world where ships go missing or mysteriously resurface. One of the most famous ghost ship stories would be of SS Bejimo. The large cargo steamer was built in Sweden. On October 1st, 1931, it got caught in pack ice. The crew decided to wait it out and managed to break free after a couple of days, only to get trapped again in less than a week. This time, they didn't manage to make it out. A rescue team went by air to save 22 of the crew members. 15 other members stayed in a wooden shelter they built not far away from the ship. Their plan was to wait out the winter and get back aboard. At the end of November, a strong blizzard was rushing through the area. When it was over, Bejimo seemed to have gone away with the storm. The captain decided it must have broken and sunk. But a few days later, a local hunter informed them that he had seen the ship around 45 miles away from their camp. The crew managed to find the ship and took the most valuable cargo from its hold. They had fears that Bejimo wouldn't live through that rough water, but it did manage to survive after all. Once the ice was gone, it floated away and ended up drifting along the shores of Canada and Alaska. Many people reported seeing the ghost ship in an open sea. Some even tried to board it to save the ship, but the weather didn't allow it to happen. The last time someone saw SS Bechimo was in 1969, 38 years after its crew had left it. It could still be drifting somewhere in the ocean. The story of MV Hoita happened in the South Pacific. The ship was originally a wooden luxury yacht. After serving for 20 years to various owners, it became a merchant ship. In 1959, it set on a trading voyage that was supposed to last around 2 days. When it didn't reach its destination on time, no one was worried at first, as things happen in the open waters. After another day, and no distress signals from the Hoita, it was obvious that something serious was going on with it. There were 25 people aboard, and their families wanted to find them. A search and rescue crew worked for 6 days looking for the ship, or at least its wreckage, in an area of nearly 100,000 square miles. That's 1.5 times as big as Florida. Sadly, the mission had come back with no results. It seemed like Hoita had disappeared without a trace. A month later, another merchant ship noticed Hoita drifting in the ocean, miles and miles away from its original route, and none of the crew members or passengers were on board. The cargo had also disappeared. The lifeboats were also gone, so the people must have escaped the ship hoping to save themselves. It turned out that the crew had been trying to get help as they tuned the radio to the International Distress Channel. But the damaged cable didn't let them send the signal any further than 2 miles. It also looked like when they were leaving the ship, the crew took the logbook with them, and we still don't know what exactly happened to Hoita. Family members of those who were on board are still looking for answers. One professor claims it must have been a corroded pipe that leaked and flooded the vessel, but we'll most likely never know for sure. In the Pacific Ocean, near Japan, there is an area nicknamed the Devil's Sea. It's believed to be one of the 12 vile vortices around the Earth. Some people claim that vile vortices have weird things going on in them because the pull of the planet's electromagnetic waves is stronger there than anywhere else. The most famous ship that disappeared in the area was a fishery patrol vessel in 1952. The ship went there to investigate the vessels that went missing previously and disappeared along with 31 crew members. Scientists who don't believe it was a mysterious disappearance blame the underwater volcano eruption for what happened.
They used to call this island the Paris of the East, mostly because it had beautiful buildings with large gardens and impressive stone archways. But now, it's nothing like it used to be, with all the architecture almost entirely covered in tree roots and vines. Ross Island is a small territory in the Indian Ocean. It's located east of the Indian city of Port Blair. Though initially thought of as a jail, Ross Island eventually became a luxurious resort for the local administrators. They called this island a real treat for its more privileged residents. It boasted opulent bungalows, stained glass window panels brought all the way from Italy, neatly kept gardens, tennis courts, and even swimming pools. Soon after the complex was closed in 1937, a powerful earthquake hit the island. It caused a lot of damage, making it even more uninhabitable. The island is now in the administration of India and has become a tourist attraction for people interested in abandoned towns. Pieces of German architecture still lie hidden in the Namibian desert. The city of Kolmanskop, Namibia, was a luxury location at its peak in the early 1900s when German workers settled here looking for diamonds. This abandoned town used to have everything from a ballroom to a hospital and even a bowling alley. It all started to decline somewhere in the late 1910s when another diamond-packed location was found nearby. So, most of the people living here moved. leaving everything behind in search of more money. Kolmanskop has since been slowly occupied by sand dunes, while the hot temperature and low moisture help to preserve the buildings. This ghost town is also available for visitors. If it sounds interesting, you can book a tour in the nearby town of Lüderitz. Another abandoned castle dominates the view in Krakow, a city in Italy. The whole village sits atop a cliff that's 1,312 feet high. The founders liked this location since they knew it would be easy to defend themselves from unwanted guests. But the castle, built in the 1300s, soon became overwhelmed by landslides and earthquakes. Even though it has no residents anymore, the medieval city often comes alive during the various local festivals that take place here in the summer months. The locals also offer tours and tell amazing stories about the location. One of the highlights of the tour is a statue that seemingly came out of nowhere and now lies in a body of water. Hidden away in the Montana mountains, Garnet Ghost Town tells the well-known American story of the West's gold rush. The town's history goes back to the 1890s, when they found a lot of gold in the Nancy Hanks mine. During its glory days, Garnet had almost 1,000 residents. Even though it's in a relatively secluded location, it had saloons, hotels, stores, a school, and other features of a regular little town. In 1905, when most of the gold had already been taken away, most mines were left behind, so only a couple of hundred residents stayed in Garnet. The final straw came in 1912, when a fire damaged most of the town's buildings. So, by the 1940s, Garnet was completely abandoned. It soon became a hotspot for treasure hunters looking for furnishings and artifacts. That was until a preservation campaign started in the 1970s. It ended with the town being declared a historic district in 2010. To this day, Garnet is one of the best preserved ghost towns in the area. Hashima Island is another abandoned location that tells us that when people leave, nature takes over. This mysterious place was even featured in a James Bond movie because of its ghostly landscape. It used to be a well-known spot in Japan for undersea coal mines, as it was opened in 1881. In 1959, at its peak, there were over 5,000 people living here, including mine workers and their families. As soon as the mines started going dry, sometime in 1970, people started to slowly depart the island, leaving it completely abandoned in 3 months. Even though nobody lives there these days, there are a lot of tourists here that drop off to wander around the abandoned homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. Another town that started with a mining company back in 1881 is Calico, California. People discovered the location was packed with silver, so it soon became home to over 500 silver mines and 3,000 residents. It used to feature hotels, general stores, restaurants, and a school. There was even a local newspaper printed here called the Calico Print. But by 1986, the town had become empty. One of the former locals decided to buy it and began its restoration, making it a registered historical landmark. It even has a museum of the Old West available for tourists. One of the most interesting attractions that were rebuilt is the 1-mile-long Calico and Odessa Railroad. It currently goes through the steep canyons and hills, and even passes the old mines and buildings north of Calico. Approximately 1/3 of the town is original, while the rest consists of newer buildings that are replicas meant to recreate the spirit of its past. If you're a fan of cars, you might have heard of Henry Ford as the famous American industrialist who founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. But in 1927, he began working on another one of his ambitious dreams, Fordlandia. It was supposed to be a massive rubber plantation located near the Tapajos River in Brazil, since he needed a reliable source of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His vision was to design a town complete with swimming pools, a golf course, living bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions for the locals. This project was unfortunate to begin with, since the local rubber trees soon got infected with leaf fungus. Even though Henry Ford invested a staggering $20 million into this potential income source, the town failed to produce the needed rubber. He had nothing left to do but to sell it to Brazil in 1945, and soon it was completely abandoned. Many of its buildings are still standing, but have been taken over by the surrounding nature. You can still see curious tourists wandering through it to this day. During its glory days, Hampi was the second largest city in the world. Looking at its ruins today, it's hard to imagine this Indian city used to be filled with temples and bazaars, and that it served as an important center of the Mauryan Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was destroyed in the 16th century, but it still has beautifully preserved forts and markets. It became part of the UNESCO World Heritage in 1986, aiming to protect its buildings, such as the Lotus Mahal, a stone structure that was carved to resemble a lotus flower opening to the sun. A tourist village was constructed back in 1920 along the shore of Epekuén, a salt lake about 370 miles southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was designed to provide people with a busy city life a breath of fresh air near the restorative salt waters of the nearby lake. It was soon equipped with a railroad station and ended up having a population of more than 5,000 residents. The project was also destined to fail soon enough, as the unusual amount of rain at that time caused Lake Epekuén to swell. In 1985, the water took over the local dam, and the town was flooded. The waters were so deep that they even reached a depth of 33 feet in 1993. They only began to recede in 2009 and left behind the remaining buildings, literally encrusted in salt. No one came back to the town except for Pablo Novak, who returned here back in 2012 and was the only resident of Villa Epekuén at the time.
When you think of theme parks, you normally imagine laughter and fun times. But once they're closed and abandoned, now that's a whole different story. Let's take a look at some of them. You decide to take a trip to New Orleans to visit Six Flags. When you arrive there, you discover the theme park is deserted. The sign that says "Closed for Storm" is still standing. You're feeling adventurous, so you let yourself past the crackling gates. Is it chilly in here, or is it just me? You walk past a swimming pool, and it looks like there's someone in there. You get closer, and oh no, it's an alligator. Better run and leave that thing alone. You keep exploring the site. The park took inspiration from the city's French architecture, but today the buildings are dirty, the windows are all shattered, and there are unusual items everywhere. Say, what is this vintage rollerblade doing here? The park closed during the hurricane, and it was left standing under 7 feet of water. No wonder the metal rides are all rusty now. This carousel doesn't look too inviting to me. We'll have to come back another time. Hey, at least you got some cool-looking pictures, right? Let's make this next one even more exciting. Imagine you plan to visit Data Park at night. Somewhere in the countryside of Belgium, you'll find a creepy theme park derelict from many years ago. You have nothing with you but the floodlight on your phone. You see the entrance of a bridge and start to make your way across. The bridge sways and creaks. Just FYI, you are crossing one of the longest hanging bridges in Europe. You made it through. Whew. The surrounding woods are terrifying, and several deserted attractions start popping up along the way. The forest has taken this twirling swing set. This huge slide would probably break if you tried to use it now. The park is in terrible condition. No wonder they closed it down due to security reasons. Best to leave it now and come back in the daylight. Your next stop is Wonderland Eurasia, also known as Anka Park in Turkey. The theme park opened in March 2019 but closed shortly after. Once inside the gigantic complex, you stumble upon what looks like an empty warehouse but ends up being an indoor roller coaster. Everything was left intact and is as good as new. You even take a quick sit on one of the roller coaster carts, perfectly lined up for the next ride. If you're feeling really adventurous, you can walk on the rails of the indoor coaster. Just be careful not to fall down. Oh, over there are the Flintstones. It's almost like a childhood deja vu here in the youngsters section of the park. On the horizon, you see what looks like the Jurassic World and decide to check it out. There are neglected statues of huge T-Rexes and fake skeletons of dinosaurs lying across the floor. Unlike the other derelict parks, everything here is new, which makes it all the more strange. Nara Dreamland was meant to be Japan's Disney World, but the project failed over time. Today, it's inhabited by moist ivies and strange birds. To get in, you'll pass a drawbridge and head into a pastel-colored castle. Your heart might beat faster than usual when you pass a fog-covered roller coaster. Was that meant to be the Matterhorn? Yup. Everything about this place says you shouldn't be there. Tossed on the park's floor, you'll see reels of tickets and misconfigured stuffed animals. How about walking into an empty diner? It's bizarre how the tables and stools are still in place. Strolling through what was once a gift shop, you'll see empty shelves and an old-school cash machine. I'd say you better leave before anything comes out of here. Now, if I say Joyland, what do you imagine? The name says it all, right? But if you decide to visit Joyland today, I bet you'll have a very chilling time. Down in Wichita, Kansas, you'll find a once famous but now empty theme park filled with eerie sights. A pale blue slide in the middle of a forest? Check. Empty warehouses straight out of a horror movie? Check. A wacky shack that looks truly wacky? You bet. But if you visit it on a good sunny day, I'd say the park is weird but still has some beauty. Joyland was built in the late 1940s. It carries a vintage aura that goes well with the neglected atmosphere. Hey, look at this rusty yellow Ferris wheel with a stripped ticket box in front. I dare say it's almost charming. The Magic Harbor Amusement Park is not that magical after all. Just outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you'll find an old theme park left to nature. Here, bumper cars are not bumping anymore. If you get into a hedge maze, you'll probably never find your way out of it. I'm not sure what you'll see running around amongst the rusty rides, so good luck if you're planning a visit. If you're looking for somewhere to cool down on a hot and sunny afternoon, how about Disney's River Country? Just kidding. You're definitely not going to want to get in the water there. The park was built in the 1970s and closed in 2001. Pay a visit to the Whitewater Rapids on foot instead of floating down the fake river. You'll have about 330 feet to stroll along a very bumpy pathway. Maybe you'll see hanging tires that served as swing sets out in the bay. You can even try zip lining if you trust the cable. To add a little more creepy to this story, the park was closed down due to a dangerous bacteria that thrived in warm bodies of water. Are you sure you don't fancy a swim? When you think Italy, I bet you think pasta and pizza, and a leaning tower somewhere. Well, in the south of Italy sits the empty Miragica amusement park. The entrance still says welcome, but people stopped coming a few years ago. The site is covered in grass everywhere. The toy-like architecture is still there. Beneath the forgotten rails of an open-air roller coaster, you can almost hear the screams of excitement of people on the ride. This part of the park is usually prohibited, but there's no one around to control that now. It might be scary to be here, but adrenaline sure is running high. This next theme park is vacant only during a certain time of the year, but it still gives the true heebie-jeebie vibes. You have to catch a train from the city and travel to the end of the line till you reach the park. Coney Island is a seasonal park, open only from the middle of spring to the middle of fall. If you want to catch its unnerving vibe, you have to visit in winter. Then, you'd walk through the rows of empty stalls with the fairy string lights still hanging above your head. It looks frozen in time as all the rides lay shut down. Speaking of which, sometimes it gets frozen for real. Under many inches of snow, Coney Island is a little less disturbing. Then again, snow does have that effect on landscapes, but the park is empty and deserted nonetheless. I bet it's a great photo op. Now, be sure to tell me in the comments which abandoned amusement park you found the creepiest. Hey, you know me, I won't be checking any of these out. I'll let you go first. You're hiking in the wilderness, looking for a safe spot to set up camp. All you can hear are leaves and branches cracking under your footsteps. Some squirrels are running up a tree over there. But suddenly, something unexpected happens. You notice something weird in the distance in between the trees. It kind of looks like a concrete structure of some sort. Weird. At this point, you're at least 20 miles deep in the woods and there are no nearby towns or villages, as far as you know. So you decide to go off the trail with your friends to get a closer look. But as you get nearer, you realize that it's actually a 12-foot tall staircase and it's leading to nowhere. What's it doing there in the middle of literally nowhere? And it doesn't even lead to anything. You put on your Sherlock Holmes cap and investigate. So maybe there used to be an old house or mansion here that collapsed over the years and the only thing left is this staircase. But weirdly enough, after circling the bizarre structure, you realize there's no trace of any ruins or even foundations. It's like someone just sliced a staircase off their house, cake style, and plopped it here for no reason. Okay. You and your friends aren't really into getting a whole lot closer. Something feels wrong. The longer you look at this weird structure, the more you feel a super creepy presence. Something tells you you should probably leave the area as fast as possible. You can't explain the feeling or take your eyes off the creepy staircase. You take out your phone and snap some pictures. Then, after a lot of hesitation, you take a few steps closer and notice that the stairs don't seem to be all that ancient, a few decades old at best. There's moss growing out from some cracks. Your friends have had enough. They ditch you and run back off to the trail, leaving you alone on the staircase. You put your foot carefully on the first step. Wham! Adrenaline rush. As you ascend to the top, someone touches your shoulder. You jump and turn around. All you see is black. As weird as this sounds, discoveries of random staircases illogically found in the woods are surprisingly common. Some are made of wood, others are bricks or stones. Some look ancient, while others look like they were finished yesterday. The one thing they all have in common, they all lead to absolutely nowhere, and they're all found in super mysterious locations. One of the most famous ones is in Chesterfield, New Hampshire, a long medieval-looking staircase made of stones with Roman arches in the middle of the woods. It's believed to have been part of Madame Antoinette Sherry's castle. She was a big singer back in Paris. The castle dates back about 100 years, and it was later discovered again in 1962. This time, there was nothing but a staircase. Another mysterious ancient staircase dates back to 9,000 years ago. It's in a forest in Italy. It looks like a series of stairs that led to a tiny platform at the top. Why go through all the trouble of building the thing if it leads to nowhere? Well, some experts think it could have been some sort of ritual tower, but your guess is as good as theirs. Some of the more modern staircases found in the woods also have an added bonus. They come with their own urban legends. Gee, would that be a 2-story or 3-story staircase? One of the most popular stories comes from the Philippines, where a forest ranger called Torkik allegedly went out on one of his routine patrols to look for missing people deep in the local jungle. That's where he claims he found some seriously out-of-place stone staircases. They even had weird markings on them. To get a better look at what was around him, he decided to climb up one of them. Just then, he was approached by a vicious stray dog that forced him further up the stairs. A few hours later, he came back to the village. Only thing was, he had been missing for 5 years. Was that staircase a time-traveling portal? Another account allegedly dates back to the 1940s, around the time of the Roswell UFO mystery. A man who claimed to be a scientist was sent to assist in investigating one of the many animal-related cases that kept popping up. Little did he know, this 1 to 2 week investigation would end up lasting 6 months. His team encountered a random wooden staircase in the woods that seemed to emit some type of frequency. They camped around 100 feet from it that night, but the next morning, it vanished. All that was left was a black burn mark where the staircase was. 2 days later, it reappeared out of nowhere, 160 feet from its original location. The team wanted to get a sample of the wood to send it off to the lab. There was one problem. No matter how hard they tried, it was impossible to chip off a piece. The wood from the staircase was apparently indestructible. These weird mystery stairs have been around since ancient Cambodia. Right in the middle of the jungle is an abandoned 2,000-foot-long staircase leading to, nowhere. According to experts, this staircase was built about 1,000 years ago. They don't know for sure, but they think it led to an ancient city. Sadly, over the years, that city is now completely covered by the dense jungle. Maybe it was an important meeting spot for travelers and merchants coming from all over the continent. Well, back to your story. You feel a strange presence behind you. You turn around, probably one of your friends snuck up on you or something. But then you realize there was no one behind you. You're the only one around. You freak out. Something is definitely wrong here. So you rush down the stairs and bolt back to your friends, panting and startled. You start to tell your friends what happened, but they don't believe you. They think you're just trying to scare them even more. But the emotion on your face, it looks legit. There's real panic in your eyes, the kind you just can't fake. Shadow or wind or whatever that thing was, your fear's real. You all agree that you should stay away from the stairs, and it's probably best if you go back home, right now. I guess camping out there overnight just wasn't meant to be. As soon as you get home, you open your phone and check out your gallery. But no, you scroll through photo after photo. The staircase, it isn't there. None of the pictures have any staircases in them. Just a small, flat clearing with nothing but trees around, no weird shadows, nothing. Your friends have the same experience. Your eye twitches and you look over your left shoulder. You're in the safety of your own home, but you suddenly feel the same presence you felt on that staircase. Oh no! Everything goes black. But you can relax. Most of these stories are just urban legends, told to give you the heebie-jeebies. The internet has a way of spreading rumors faster than the speed of light. Most of these stairs might have even been built on purpose just recently. One weekend woodshop project, a couple of photos, and you too could be a sensation on every urban legend website. Then you just tear it down, take a photo to show it magically disappeared, and just like that, you're an internet superstar. But let's say you find some real stairs on your weekend camping trip. They're most likely the remnants from an old house or a cabin that got demolished or just collapsed after it was abandoned. Hey, it's 2021. There's a logical explanation for just about everything these days. That presence you felt was most likely your own mind playing tricks on you. When you see something in real life that looks like something you saw on a website or a scary movie, your mind starts to work overtime, and you can actually see something or feel something that's not even there. That's what some people say happens when you get hypnotized. You want to see something so bad, and you do. That's probably what happened. Or was it?